The Salvation Army is a first responder during emergencies. What role does the Salvation Army play before, during, and after a disaster?
I mean, that's a great question because, right now, one of our key messages in preparedness, getting people to take the measures to be prepared for themselves and their families. Right now is a critical time. And the more we as the Salvation Army can help to spread that message, not only just through our public reach day to day in the community, through internet, through social media, all those roles, but it's also to those people we serve every day. We serve vulnerable populations every day in the Central Florida area. So reaching out to those people and getting the message of preparedness is critical. Meanwhile, training our teams, getting our people ready, our volunteers, our staff, getting those people ready. And I'll tell you, if you want to know more about how you can be a part of our disaster relief team so that we're preparing teams, you can go to our disaster.salvationarmyusa.org. There's lots of information there about how you can become a volunteer to support the disaster relief program. So that's another way of preparedness. When it comes time for response, the Salvation Army's first role in there is our food service, our hydration, and our emotional and spiritual care. That's our response right after the disaster occurs. And we're going to do that every time. You can count on that from events like here in Central Florida with the Pulse or tornadoes in 1998 and many events over history in 2004 when we responded to the hurricanes. That food service and emotional and spiritual care is our first way to help people make some sense of calm in a time of chaos. That's what we do. And as it moves on, we may be doing financial assistance. We may be able to do just some clothing assistance, whether food assistance. And then on down the road, if we have the resources available at the time and people entrust that gift to the Salvation Army to help disaster survivors, it may lead into some steps to help them recover as a family. And it's really conditional about how the people and how the public support the Salvation Army during those events as to how much we can do. But those are the things you can count on for the Salvation Army. And the biggest thing we say to people is, if you want to help the Salvation Army, help us with financial resources, because there's a lot we can do with families locally. Now, we know that people are going to pull up and empty out their closets, and they're going to give us used clothing, they're going to give us a lot of stuff, and believe it or not, one of the things we plan after a disaster is to help process all those donations that come in. We try to make the best of the stuff that comes in, but oftentimes we get some stuff we don't want or need, and disaster survivors can't use. So one of the programs the Salvation Army does in response is donations management, sifting through the stuff to get to the stuff that can be used for the people who have been affected. And then we also want to educate people on mitigation. We want people to know, is your home safe? Are there things you can do that you can afford to do, simple things, to help make sure that you live in a safe home, that you don't have to evacuate during the disaster? There's a lot of resources there for people to find out answers to those questions. As a Salvation Army, we want to help people know where to go to get information about that. So it kind of is the whole circle of emergency management, if you will, from mitigation to preparedness, response, and recovery. Salvation Army has a role in each of those, and that's what we try to do during the times when we're not responding to disasters.
Now, it sounds like the Salvation Army provides a plethora of different services during a disaster. And earlier you mentioned something about volunteers. Can anyone volunteer?
Absolutely. Anybody can volunteer to be a part of the Salvation Army. Now, we choose in our special or skilled positions the things that we need people to know, specific things like how to handle food safely, how to work in really rough conditions. We want those to be our trained volunteers. But there's a lot of opportunity, whether it is packing food boxes, sorting through all of the stuff that comes in, helping to process stuff, handing out water. It doesn't take a skilled volunteer or a skilled employee of the Salvation Army, so we count on volunteers. But there are a few steps that we ask people to do by registering on our website so that we at least have some tracking record to help to communicate to them, notifying when they can volunteer, and it gives us some critical information if something was to happen during that event that we already have some information for them. And they can do that all on our website at disaster.salvationarmyusa.org. They can go ahead and register and become a volunteer. And what we say is, we know that people are just going to come because people are so generous in their time. We know that people are going to do that. But it's much better if they just take a few simple steps right now just to register online. They can go set up their own little disaster profile and they can say, don't call me for this, this, and this. But I want to do that. And we ask people to do that today because that's the best way people can volunteer, is to be affiliated before the disaster occurs. And then we'll help to manage the rest of it, those folks that come in during the event that didn't take time before to register with us.
Earlier, you also mentioned the Pulse tragedy here in Orlando. What was the Salvation Army's role during that tragedy?
Well, the initial call came very early in the morning on that Sunday morning to the Salvation Army that they knew that the situation was escalating at the time, and they had a ton of law enforcement agents and people that were impacted in the area. So they knew that they needed some hydration support, and ultimately we mobilized our mobile feeding unit, put it on site, and very quickly saw the hundreds and hundreds of responders that came from the local Orlando Police Department, the County Emergency Management, our sheriff's offices, but also from ATF and FBI and all these players that came in to help secure and make sure it was a safe place. And we ended up serving them. And if you'll remember, I mean, as tragic as that event was, that day, the heat index was over 100 degrees, and all of those people, the families, the people that were there around the site, there was heat exhaustion going on. So our role of being there to support, helping not only make sure that they had fluids to make sure that they didn't become impacted by this event, to stabilize the event, to also support our responders and the families that were there. Now, that transition, and we continued that service of serving 24 hours a day there on site, but that service also continued as we set up a service center, and we're able to help some of the families with some of their critical needs and those that came in to support their family. We were there to help offer some assistance so that those families could deal with that tragedy. And we actually considered it an honor to be a part of that in helping to support the survivors and those that had lost their families.
Now, what has been the most memorable experience since you've been with the Salvation Army? Because you've been here for a few years, correct?
Yeah. I started in 1996 in the Salvation Army doing disaster services, and my first event was the Value Jet crash in the Florida Everglades. And a lot of people don't remember that very well now. It's been a while. But that was my first introduction to being on site and managing a disaster event. Since that time, I will tell you this. I've gotten pretty good at what we do, but it's because I've screwed up a lot.
Okay.
So I've made mistakes before, and we learn from those mistakes from disaster to disaster. So it's hard for me to say this one was the most impactful. But in each one, I see something different, and each one I count it an honor to serve on behalf of the Salvation Army, but on behalf of the communities at which we're affecting. You see some amazing stuff from volunteers and people that want to help. And quite frankly, it's an honor to be leading those folks and working with them to serve others during times of disaster. Obviously, 9/11 is one that was very impactful for me. And it was one of those moments where if you ever know what it's like for the eyes of the world to be watching on serving and everybody wanting to help, and you are one of the few that is honored to be there, I didn't take that for granted. And that had a big impact on me to be a big part of that in New York, serving our responders and those people trying to get things secured after 9/11. But I'll also say that the Salvation Army responding to the efforts in Haiti was after the earthquake. We were there within 24 hours supporting our Salvation Army that has been in Haiti since 1950. And we were able to get in there and help get our services back up and running so that we could help those that we serve every day. And there was nothing like standing at a Salvation Army compound, which is buildings and facilities. There's a school, there's a medical clinic, there's all these things in Haiti. And to see lines of 10,000 people standing just outside the Salvation Army. And I had never felt so empowered by the respect that people had of the Salvation Army than when we walked through. And people just came to us with appreciation for being there and serving after the earthquake. So that was an honor for me as well, and has kept with me. So I would say 9/11 and the Haiti earthquake have had some significant impact on me personally.
That's great.